Jack, The Last Heir of the Stars, Chapter 6. The Forgotten System, Part 1. The Silent Journey. The chamber remained silent. No one dared to speak. The words still echoed in Jack's mind. The last heir has been located. They weren't a warning. They were a report. Someone, somewhere, had been searching for him all along. The eldest architect slowly approached the shattered crystal floor. His hand hovered over the glowing fractures. For the first time since Jack had met him, his hands trembled. "We have no time." Jack stepped closer. "What happens now?" The architect didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned toward the endless walls surrounding the chamber. The crystal began to move. Massive rings of white stone rose from the floor. Ancient mechanisms awakened with a deep metallic hum. The room itself was transforming. Jack watched as countless streams of blue light converged into a single floating sphere. Inside it, an entire star map appeared. Millions of stars, millions of worlds. Then, one by one, entire sectors vanished. Not hidden, erased, as though someone had deliberately removed them from existence. Jack frowned. Those systems, they aren't on the map. They no longer exist, the architect replied. Jack looked back at the sphere. But stars don't simply disappear. The architect's expression remained unchanged. No, they are forgotten. Jack felt a chill. What does that mean? The architect reached toward the sphere. A small region at the very edge of the galaxy began to glow. It wasn't marked by a name, only by 16 familiar numbers. The same coordinates. The ghost signal. Jack's heartbeat quickened. My mother's transmission led here. The architect nodded. This place has many names. The silent system. The empty crown. The grave of light. Jack looked at him. And its real name? The architect hesitated, almost reluctantly. Then he whispered, "We no longer speak it." Before Jack could ask another question, the sphere flickered violently. A second signal appeared, not from the forgotten system, from somewhere much closer. The architect's eyes widened. "They're already moving." Jack looked around. "Who?" The answer came from every architect at once. The Watchers. The temperature inside the chamber suddenly dropped. The lights dimmed. The floating map dissolved. Then, every surface in the room reflected the same image. A fleet. Not dozens. Not hundreds. Thousands of black vessels, perfectly silent, drifting between galaxies. Without engines. Without lights. Without signals. Waiting. One ship slowly turned. Its bow pointed directly toward Jack, as if it had seen him through impossible distances. Then, every screen went dark. Silence. The eldest architects spoke only 4 words. "They know we're leaving." Jack tightened his grip around the Arcadian medallion. For the first time, he understood that the coordinates were never an invitation. They were bait. Chapter 6. The Forgotten System, Part 2. The Ark of Silence. The chamber trembled one last time. Then, everything became still. The floating star map vanished. The crystal walls returned to their calm, flowing rhythm. Only the Arcadian medallion continued to glow, brighter than before. The eldest architect looked toward Jack. "There is only one way to reach the forgotten system." Jack crossed his arms. "My ship." The architect slowly shook his head. The Erebus would never survive the crossing. "What crossing?" The architect raised his hand. The crystal floor separated with a deep, resonant hum. A circular platform began descending into darkness. Cold air rose from below, ancient, dry, as though it had been trapped for millions of years. Jack stepped onto the platform. The architects followed without a word. Slowly, they descended. Far beneath the crystal city, far beneath anything Jack had imagined. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours. Time had become meaningless again. Finally, the platform stopped. Before them stood a colossal vault. Its doors stretched hundreds of meters high. They weren't made of metal, nor stone. Their surface resembled black glass, reflecting not the people standing before it, but distant galaxies. Jack frowned. "I've never seen anything like this." "You were never meant to." The eldest architect placed his palm against the door. Nothing happened. Then, the medallion and Jack's neck pulsed. A beam of blue light leapt from it and struck the center of the gate. The entire vault awakened. Ancient symbols ignited one by one. The sound that followed was unlike anything Jack had ever heard. Not machinery, not energy. It sounded like something remembering. The enormous doors slowly parted. Beyond them, darkness. Not ordinary darkness. It seemed to absorb every trace of light. Jack felt his instincts screaming at him not to enter. Yet he couldn't look away. Then, a single blue light appeared, followed by another, and another. Hundreds, thousands. The darkness slowly revealed its secret. Rows upon rows of colossal vessels rested in silence, each one larger than a moon, each one bearing the same symbol engraved on Jack's medallion. His voice barely escaped his lips. An entire fleet. The architect answered quietly, "No." Jack looked at him. "Then what is this?" The architect's eyes reflected the endless silhouettes. "This dot is the Ark of Silence." Jack slowly walked forward. Dust floated through the air like frozen stars. Nothing had moved here for ages beyond imagination. Until now, a deep vibration echoed through the hangar. One of the immense ships shimmered. A thin line of blue light appeared across its hull. Then another. The ship was waking up. The younger architect stepped back. "No, it cannot choose." Jack turned. "What do you mean?" The architect stared at the glowing vessel in disbelief. "It hasn't awakened in over 12 million years." The blue light spread across the ancient hull like veins carrying life through a sleeping giant. A low, haunting tone rolled through the ark. The sound wasn't loud, but Jack felt it in his chest, in his bones, in his memories. Suddenly, images flooded his mind. A woman in a white command uniform. A little boy laughing beneath an artificial sky. A burning world. His mother's voice. "If this ship wakes for you, never let them reach the heart." Jack gasped and fell to one knee. The vision vanished. The hangar was silent once more. The architects stared at him. The eldest spoke in a whisper. "You saw her." Jack slowly lifted his head. His eyes were filled with disbelief. "She knew this place." The architect closed his eyes. Then, for the first time, he revealed a truth he had guarded for decades. Commander Alara did not discover the Ark. A long silence followed. Then he finished the sentence. "She commanded it." Chapter 6. The Forgotten System Part 3. The Captain's Secret. The Ark awakened. One after another. Blue rivers of light spread across the colossal vessel. Ancient engines breathed for the first time in 12 million years. The sound was deep, slow, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. Jack couldn't take his eyes off the ship. It wasn't merely activating. It was recognizing him. A beam of pale light descended from the ceiling. It stopped only centimeters from Jack. The medallion answered. Its blue crystal floated away from his chest, suspended in the air. The beam surrounded it. Then, a voice echoed through the ark. Clear, gentle, familiar. Identity confirmed. Jack's breath caught. The voice continued. Captain Alara Ardent. A brief pause. Authorization inherited. Every architect in the hangar lowered their heads. Not out of fear, out of respect. Jack looked around in disbelief. What does that mean? No one answered. Instead, the ship answered. Massive rings of light rotated beneath the floor. A hologram slowly emerged. Not a map, not a weapon, a recording. A woman appeared. Her white command uniform carried the same emblem as the medallion. She stood tall, calm, and unwavering. Commander Alara. Jack couldn't move. She looked exactly as she had in his fragmented memories. Then she smiled. Not at the architects. Not at the ship. Directly. At Jack. If you're seeing this dot, then I failed. Silence. Jack felt his throat tighten. Which means the Watchers found me before I could return. The recording flickered. Static crawled across the image. Then stabilized again. Listen carefully. Everything you've been told about the heart. She hesitated. Is only half the truth. The architects exchanged uneasy glances. None of them interrupted. The heart is not a weapon. It is not a machine. It is a prison. Jack's eyes widened. Even the oldest architects slowly closed his eyes, as though hearing words he had feared for countless ages. Alara continued. And something inside that prison dot has begun to wake. The recording suddenly distorted. A violent burst of interference shook the entire ark. The lights flashed crimson. Warning symbols erupted across every wall. One of the younger architects shouted, "Something is forcing its way into the archive." The hologram trembled. For a fraction of a second, another face appeared over Alara's. Not human. Its skin resembled polished obsidian. Its eyes burned with molten gold. It smiled. Not with kindness. With certainty. Then, it spoke. "At last, the heir has arrived." The recording exploded into static. Every light in the ark went out. Darkness. Absolute darkness. Only one sound remained. Slow. Heavy. Footsteps. Not inside the hangar. Above it. Something enormous had just boarded the ark. Chapter 6. The Forgotten System Part 4. The One Who Never Left Darkness. Not a single light remained inside the ark. The endless hangar disappeared into a sea of black. Only the Arcadian medallion continued to glow. Its pale blue light barely illuminated Jack's face. Then, thud. A heavy step echoed through the ship. Metal groaned beneath an impossible weight. No one moved. Another step. Thud. Closer. The youngest architect raised his hand. For the first time, Jack saw a weapon appear. It formed from streams of white light. Not forged. Created. A long spear of crystal. The others did the same. 3 silent guardians stood between Jack and the darkness. "Stay behind us." Jack had never heard fear in an architect's voice before. Now, he heard it clearly. A low vibration rolled through the ark. Ancient systems awakened one by one. Blue symbols ignited across the walls. Then, a calm mechanical voice echoed through the ship. Primary command systems restored. Another pause. Scanning. Jack looked around. The voice wasn't coming from speakers. The ark itself was speaking. Crew identification in progress. One by one, names appeared in glowing light. Architect Unit 03. Architect Unit 11. Architect Prime. Then, the final line appeared. Jack stared. Captain Alara Ardent. Authorized silence. The architects exchanged uneasy glances. One whispered, "Impossible." The system continued. Searching for current command authorization. A soft tone echoed. Then, authorization transferred. Jack felt the medallion grow warm. Another line appeared. Current acting commander. The letters formed slowly, almost deliberately. Jack Ardent. The entire ark came alive. Thousands of lights ignited across the colossal vessel. Engines older than civilizations awakened. Entire decks unlocked. Massive blast doors began opening one after another. Deep inside the ship, something answered. A roar. Not mechanical. Not electronic. Alive. The sound rolled through the corridors like distant thunder. The youngest architect took a step backward. It heard the transfer. Jack frowned. What heard it? Before anyone could answer, every display changed. Security recordings. Hundreds of them. Different corridors. Different decks. Different centuries. The same hallway. Over. And over. And over again. At first, nothing happened. Then, in the oldest recording, a shadow crossed the corridor. Too fast to identify. The timestamp read, 12,481,006 years ago. The next recording, the same corridor. Nothing. Timestamp, 8,203,114 years ago. Then another, 4,701,228 years ago. Again, a shadow, standing perfectly still, watching the camera. Another recording, only a few hundred years old. The shadow had moved. One step closer. Jack felt cold. The recordings accelerated. Years became months. Months became days. The shadow continued moving. always one step closer, always watching. Finally, the last recording appeared. Timestamp: 3 minutes ago. The corridor was empty. The architects looked relieved. Then the image flickered. Slowly, a tall figure stepped into view, not from the end of the corridor, from behind the camera. It leaned toward the lens. Its face remained hidden beneath darkness. Only two golden eyes reflected the faint emergency lights. Then, it smiled. The recording ended. Silence. A warning siren echoed through the ark. Unidentified life form detected. A pause. Then the system corrected itself. Correction. Another pause. Longer this time. As though the ark itself was uncertain. Returning commander detected. Every architect froze. One whispered, "No." Jack slowly turned. "What does returning commander mean?" The eldest architect closed his eyes. When he spoke, his voice barely rose above a whisper. "It means this ship believes its true master has come home." At that exact moment, every light aboard the ark went out again. Complete silence. Then, a calm voice echoed through the darkness. Not loud, not threatening, almost welcoming. "Welcome back." A pause. Then the final words. "My son." Chapter 6. The Forgotten System Part 5. The Empty Throne. Silence. The ark had stopped shaking. The emergency lights faded into a dim blue glow. No alarms. No footsteps. Nothing. Only the slow pulse of the Arcadian medallion. Jack looked at the architects. Where did it go? The eldest architect answered without looking at him. It never left. The words settled heavily in the air. Then, the ark spoke again. "Commander." A narrow corridor illuminated ahead. Its walls unfolded like living crystal. The ship was opening the path. Not for everyone. Only for Jack. The youngest architect stepped forward. "You must not go alone." The ark interrupted. Access denied. A wall of blue light appeared between Jack and the architects. No weapon could pass through it. The eldest architect slowly lowered his crystalline spear. "It has chosen." Jack looked at the endless corridor. Every instinct told him to turn back. Instead, he stepped forward. The corridor sealed behind him. The silence became unbearable. Every footstep echoed through the ancient vessel. The walls were covered with faded murals. Civilizations. Stars. Entire galaxies. Then, something unexpected. Humans. Jack stopped. They weren't primitive. They wore uniforms. The same emblem as his medallion. He whispered, "Impossible." A calm voice answered, "No, it is merely forgotten." Jack spun around. No one. Only the ark. Its voice came from everywhere. "Who are you?" A pause. Then, "I am the first ark." Jack continued walking. "Who built you?" The answer came immediately. "Your ancestors." Jack froze. His heart pounded. No. Humanity isn't old enough. The ark remained silent, as though it had expected that response. The corridor opened into an immense circular chamber. Columns of white crystal rose into darkness. At the center, a throne. Black, ancient, beautiful. It seemed carved from solid night. No dust covered it, as if someone had left it only moments ago. The ark spoke once more. "Please, take your place." Jack slowly approached. His hand hovered over the armrest. The medallion glowed brighter than ever before. The moment his fingers touched the throne, the chamber exploded with light. Millions of stars surrounded him, not projections, memories. He saw worlds being born, galaxies colliding. The architects, young, before they had become guardians. Then, a single figure, tall, wrapped in a dark cloak, standing before thousands of ships. Every civilization knelt, even the architects. The figure slowly turned, but before Jack could see the face, the vision shattered. He was back inside the chamber. The throne stood empty. Then, a quiet laugh echoed behind him. Not cruel, not mocking, almost warm. Jack slowly turned. The chamber was empty. Then the voice spoke, clear, calm, close enough to whisper. "You've grown." A pause. Jack His breathing stopped. You know my name. Another pause. Then, I've known it, since the day you were born. Jack searched the darkness. Show yourself. Silence. Then footsteps. Slow. Measured. A shadow appeared between the crystal columns. Its face remained hidden. Only two golden eyes reflected the pale light. The figure stopped several meters away. Neither of them moved. Finally, the stranger spoke. Tell me, what did the architects call me? Jack answered quietly. The Watchers. For the first time, the stranger smiled. A sad smile. Then he shook his head. No. That is the name history gave us. He took one final step into the light. Still, his face remained hidden. Only the outline of an ancient uniform became visible. The same emblem, the same symbol, the same mark that rested on Jack's medallion. The stranger lowered his head and whispered the words that shattered everything Jack believed. My name. A long silence. Is Orion. Another step, and I was the first guardian of the heart. Jack's voice barely escaped his lips. Then why is everyone hunting you? Orion closed his eyes. When he answered, his voice carried thousands of years of regret. Because I refused to open the prison.